Well, hello and welcome to a Spanish-flavoured La Course on Tête, riding the wheel once again of Peloton magazine and our tasty Belgian waffle ride friends. And we are coming to you not from the High Sierra, no, of course not, but from the English lowlands, the French Pyrenees, and a high-security stockade in Australia where Sophie Smith has been serving time. What sort of time? We hope to find out soon. Paolo, tinkle those ivories. My name's OJ Borge, and as always, I'd like to high-five the Aérogramme subscribers. And do you know what? Already, it is mid-August, and we're well into the first week of the Vuelta, that is the Vuelta. Joining me to mull over the opening shots and cast their eye over what's to come in a stage race that includes no less than 9 summit finishes is the Prince of the Pyrenees. That is you, Peter Cossins.
Hello, OJ. Yeah, looking forward to seeing some of those summit finishes coming along soon.
9 summit finishes, it's a monster. And also clutching a bottle of cheap vodka and fake tan that he bought in duty-free, Jeremy Whittle. Jeremy, are you over the Tour de France yet?
When was that?
The Tour de France feels like, I don't know, I think you were... Of all, I love you, Jeremy, but you seemed most perturbed at the end of the Tour de France, more fried than usual.
No, I think what it was about the Tour was that I think it was so obviously over as a contest, as a meaningful contest, by the end of the first week. And I really struggled with that because I think, I don't know, it's just kind of like the prospect of 2 weeks when you kind of know who's going to win the yellow jersey in Paris. I mean, he had to fall off. Tadej Pogačar, this is, by the way. He had to fall off or get really sick to not lose that race. And I think when, when it's a 3-week race, you kind of do want that unpredictability and volatility and, all of those things.
No, I didn't have that. I absolutely agree with you. I do agree with you. I think if we're going to look back quickly at the Tour de France before we get into the Vuelta, I felt that as well. And what killed me was the hope that on a stage, as a viewer, as somebody who's excited about the race, who wanted the GC battle to be large, I kept hoping that somebody would do an attack, but the problem was, Pete, he was too good. He covered everything.
He did. There was just that one moment on the Ventoux when Vingegaard got a little bit of a gap, and then he was closed down on the descent. But it kind of gave you just that hope that something might happen in the Pyrenean stages. But I mean, Pogačar was. Maybe he wasn't even struggling that day. He just thought, well, I'll let Vingegaard go and catch him on the descent, and that was simply his plan. I mean, he was just so in control of that race. It was ridiculous, really. I mean, like Jeremy says, it was over. I mean, there was. I think every day was good. There was something to talk about, but the GC battle was not one of the best.
Yeah, that's a fair comment. I mean, there were good stories every day, and I bet that ASO, the Tour promoters were very, very thankful that they had the dream comeback story of Mark Cavendish to keep the wolf from the door in terms of TV ratings and interest in the race, because that was the other main story. The other thing I would say is that what's really interesting about the Vuelta is that Tadej Pogačar isn't there. He's not racing.
Is he missed? Because I'm really sad. I wanted this battle of Bernal and Roglič and Tadej Pogačar, and he's not there. He's not turned up.
Well, I think we get the same result again, though, wouldn't we? Do you think? Do you not think?
We? I think part of the reason that he isn't racing is perhaps because he thought that he couldn't win. That he obviously went very hard to win the Tour. Then he went out and did the Olympics. He's kind of got half an eye on the World Championship, end of season classics. I just think maybe the Vuelta was a bit of a stretch for him, and he needed a break. But I mean, I'm sure he'll come back and win it. I mean, it's a real shame, like you say, that he's not here racing against Roglič and Bernal and the rest. But I mean, it's still a great field, and the race is really nicely set up as it stands.
It really is. But I guess, I mean, we've just talked about how dominant he was in the Tour. Is there still, Jeremy, a question mark? Is there still a little asterisk? Not asterisk is the wrong thing to use there. Question mark. Because everyone fell off in those first few days, and he was the only person really who was uninjured to get through it. Is there still a question mark over how dominant a rider he really is, whether he is this 5+ minute GC winner?
No, because I don't think that the outcome would have been any different, actually, if they'd all stayed on their bikes and hadn't had the bad luck and the incidents and the misfortunes that they did. I think we would have still seen a very similar top 3. And I think we would probably have still almost definitely have seen the same winner.
Okay. Well, we'll get into who we think is going to win this Vuelta a little bit later on. First, though, a fascinating article that was written on the La Course on Tête website by you, Pete, and that is what the Vuelta's like as a race. So for me personally, I've always seen it on the second step of the GTs, of the Grand Tours. You know, obviously the Tour de France is the big wahoonie, it's the biggest thing in the world, it transcends cycling. I've always seen the Vuelta as the same as the Giro, as stablemates in a way, you know, just a little bit under the Tour. I didn't realise that up until, 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't the size of the race it is now.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed a lot in the last few years. I mean, I've kind of reflected back to 20 years to the 2001 race. And when you look back at the overall classification at the end of that race, I think 15 of the top 20 riders were Spanish. I mean, it was a race that was completely dominated by the home nation. Not many riders were really interested in not so much, well, I mean, the Vuelta was part of it, but they weren't really interested at the end of the season. I mean, you look back to that period and it was dominated obviously by Lance Armstrong, but the likes of Jan Ullrich and whatever. When the Tour came to an end, effectively most of them just kind of forgot about the rest of the season. They didn't really need to race. They kind of built up for the Tour, and that was enough. They weren't going to get any more glory from riding the Vuelta. And it took a long time for that to change. And it's kind of hard to pinpoint one reason why that was. But I mean, I think partly it stems back to the realisation that a lot of riders had and sponsors and teams, they all had that the Giro, the Giro was always prized, but the Vuelta was also a title that really had some kudos to it, and it could kind of save a season, as we often see it. And we saw riders, I mean, obviously Alberto Contador's Spanish, so he was always likely to ride it, but we saw lots of other riders starting to target it as well. The likes of Sky went there with Bradley Wiggins and Chris Froome. That was kind of when we really saw them. I mean, they kind of dominated I think it was a 2011 Vuelta. We saw Vincenzo Nibali win his first Grand Tour at the Vuelta. We saw Fabio Aru and Tom Dumoulin have a kind of a ding-dong battle in 2015, which went in Aru's favour. And it's really become, I mean, certainly in the last 3 years, we've seen Pogačar come through, winning 3 stages. Last year, a couple of years ago, we've seen Primož Roglič winning 2 editions back-to-back and now going for a third. It doesn't have that feeling now of it's like a consolation prize. It's actually something that people want to win. And I think it's nice that it's like that, because it adds some weight to the back end of the season. It links in with the likes of the Tour of Lombardy and the other races, the World Championships, for example, that you really want to see thrive at the back end of the season.
I think the thing for me about the Vuelta is that I still think it suffers from that kind of fag end of the season feeling to it. I don't fully agree with Pete. I mean, one of the things that's happened, and I think this is right, Pete, isn't it? Is that ASO, who own the Tour de France, have they taken a controlling stake in it now?
They've got 50%, I think, so, or maybe it's 51. So I mean, they own half the race basically.
Yeah, because it had a Spanish promoter. I think Unipublic had exclusive ownership of it before, didn't they? Who are a Spanish promoter, and that they I guess they sold that stake. What was it? I guess a decade ago, was it?
Probably around that time, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think obviously having English speaking winners or English speaking contenders helped internationalise it as well to both Northern European markets and also guess North American markets as well, but it still feels to me like it doesn't get the coverage and hasn't got the romance that the Giro and the Tour have as well. And I think it demonstrates one of the problems of the Tour being so all-consuming is that this race, which is, you look at some of the stages and you look at some of the finishes and some of the climbs that are included, and there's a particular climb towards the end of the race. In fact, it's really the last significant climb of the race, the Alto del Gamoniteru. I think I've said that correctly. Maybe you might get corrected on that, I think. But that's in Asturias, and that's kind of, I've seen some pictures of that which have been bumping around on social media, and it looks like this kind of, it really does look like a goat track into the sky, and that's the kind of climb that you could never feature on the Tour de France because of all the logistics and all the infrastructure that you'd have to get up to the summit. And it would really prohibit a road like that from being used unless it was a lot wider and rebuilt and all of those kind of things, which is actually what they did with the Col de Porte in the Pyrenees, because that was a gravel road, wasn't it? Quite a bad road before they had a stage finish up there. Yeah, so I mean, it's a shame because I think sometimes it's the best race of the year. I mean, sometimes it's last year's was very exciting, wasn't it? And it came down to the final mountain stage, and even the last few kilometers of the last summit finish, it was in the balance, really, wasn't it, between Roglič and Carapaz? So I think I still think it suffers from being slightly kind of on the back burner or forgotten about or in the shadow of the other two Grand Tours.
I see what you're saying there. I think the excitement that everyone I know who watches it feels like that second chance. It feels like the second chance for everybody who didn't go well in the Tour de France. It gives them a chance, the teams, the rest of it, to save their season. I find something beautifully exciting about it, I must admit.
Oh, I do as well. I just think it deserves more coverage. I mean, that's my point, is that, everybody's so drained by the Tour de France in terms of, media coverage, in terms of kind of spend and budgets. Everything's poured into the Tour de France, which remains, despite the efforts of the other two Grand Tours, the be all and end all of the season. And it's what sponsorships are built.
Yeah,
on. You've got to admit that.
Absolutely.
The budgets are not poured into teams because they want to stage in the Vuelta, or they got the King of the Mountains in the Vuelta. They're poured into teams because of the Tour de France.
So here you go. As journalists that you both are, have you found it difficult over the years to pitch stories or the chance of going covering the Vuelta?
Yes,
definitely. Yeah.
Why is that? Just a lack of interest, as you say, and everything's been poured into the Tour.
I think because it just follows so closely that the people, well, journalistic budgets have gone by that point as well. People have spent so much on the Tour, and everybody's kind of almost raced out, I guess, by that point. I mean, this season's a little bit different because there's still quite a lot of anticipation about the end of the season. Because obviously we've got this kind of double Paris-Roubaix coming up in 6 or 7 weeks' time still, and we've got the Worlds in Flanders, and the Vuelta is kind of building up to all this. But I think there is a feeling that, I mean, it does. The fact that the Tour's right in the middle of the season, it's like having the World Cup in the middle of a football season, and then thinking, well, what are we playing on for now? To a certain extent. But one thing I would say about it is, though, that among the riders, the Vuelta's, for a lot of riders, the Vuelta's their favourite Grand Tour, because, I mean, everybody, when you go into the Giro and particularly into the Tour, everybody's at 100%. Whereas at the Vuelta, things are a lot more uncertain, and things can they can be good one day and not so good on another, and still remain in contention. It's a lot more relaxed. There's a good vibe around the race. I mean, I know Chris Froome, for example, always loved riding the Vuelta because it just felt like everything was kind of lower key and better for that.
I think one of the things that I was told about the Vuelta by a few riders was that it was easier. Sounds like an old like a parable. It is easier for a professional bike rider to win a stage in the Vuelta in August or September than it is to win a stage in the Giro or the Tour, because everybody's, as you said, Pete, everybody starts the season in great shape. They haven't crashed yet. They haven't got sick yet. They're riding for a new team. They're riding in a new environment. They want to make a big impression. So March, April, May, June into the Tour. Everybody's optimistic. I can still make this fantastic season for me. By the time they get to September, they're kind of like they're not quite as up for it as they were 6 months earlier. Obviously, that's normal, isn't it? And that's why I think it, again, as I said, it's got the fag end thing. But I think also this year is different because obviously we've had a very weird year last year with the pandemic. Things are more settled this year, but then we've also had the Olympic Games in the one year later than it ought to have been, and it's really interesting when we've watched the first few stages of the Vuelta so far to see that Primož Roglič has come back from winning a gold medal looking in flying form. Richard Carapaz has come back from winning a gold medal looking like he's just pretty tired.
Why is everyone who took part in the Olympic road race so tired? I mean, it was a one-day race. I mean, Carapaz, yes, he won it, but it was a few weeks ago now.
I think the journey out there, the journey back, probably the restrictions that they were under when they were there took a lot out of them. I mean, obviously, Carapaz finished on the podium at the Tour as well, and that would have taken a lot out of him. Roglič didn't have that. I mean, Roglič crashed out in the first week. So he's much fresher, and I think it's just that thing of trying to I mean, going from the Tour and the Vuelta and then onto the Vuelta is not normally a particularly hard thing for the pros to do. I mean, they know that everybody's going to be a level lower. But I think for those people who have been out to Tokyo, it's meant that they're perhaps a level lower than they would expect to be normally. And that's why we're seeing Carapaz struggling already when we were...
You can tell that Carapaz is kind of glass half full, glass half empty, though, because he's only got half a gold helmet.
What do you think of his gold bike?
It's not gold.
What colour is it? It is gold, isn't it?
Kind of goldy, isn't it? But it's... I don't know. Is it gold or is it?
It's gold. He's got a whole sort of front end of it that's gold. What do you? Do you know? I
think it looks great. I actually thought the bike looked
did it
really? Yeah, I thought in this, in the bright sunlight, I thought it looked wow. That looks really fabulous. But I mean, you've got to be looking like a god if you're riding that, haven't you?
You do, and
like a god.
It's the same as the gold helmet. I mean, I must admit, I am not a cycling pro, as you both well know. But I think if I won the Olympic Games, I think I'd not want to wear the gold helmet. I'd feel like a bit of a helmet.
OJ, you shouldn't have said you're not a cycling pro, because didn't you beat a Tour de France winner the other day?
True. It is actually true. I did, on Zwift, I did a chase race with Geraint Thomas, where he gave me 3 minutes. We both had, like 300 people on our teams to go with it. I did an interview beforehand, and I set off. He gave me 3 minutes. And I beat him. I managed to get to the end without him catching me. I think he only made up about 10 seconds on me over the entire thing.
Can you imagine how he feels?
But the asterisk that goes with it is the fact that I don't think he'd realised that I was going to treat it as my Olympic Games, as my World Cup, and went off. I'd visualised on the train on the way down to London. I was totally into it. Okay, so I don't think he'd realised that to start with.
I mean, he's not had a great year, and now
now he's been beaten
all
by
of
me.
That, he's now sitting around going. Beaten by a guy like OJ.
I know, but he also had done 4 hours training that morning because he was in France. He'd only had a slice of toast, and his wife turned off his turbo trainer halfway through. So that's the asterisk that goes with it, that I managed to beat him. But I am ready for my pro contract to be delivered for 2022.
Well, you're younger than Alejandro Valverde, aren't you?
I am, and I am twice the weight of a Yates brother, meaning you get twice the rider for half the price.
Sounds like good value to me. I hope some top agents are listening.
I'm expecting Bora or UAE to come in for an offer any day. They seem to be buying up everybody.
Well, that segues us beautifully into all of the goings-on, which everyone seems to have been signed by UAE. How come they're so flush at the moment? I mean, is it just they realise they've got Pogačar and they can clean up the market and dominate?
I don't know. I mean, it's just been astounding. Any rider that's coming on the market, either them or Bora, are buying. I mean, it did seem to be getting ridiculous at one point. I did think they might come in for me, and I'd get a place on the roster somewhere. But I mean, obviously Bora have got a lot of money.
What a pair of dreams! Honestly.
I mean, Bora obviously got a lot of money.
I could have been a contender. I could have been here. Carry on.
I say Bora have got a lot of money because Peter Sagan and his entourage are leaving, so that kind of leaves them with 5 million euros or something to spend on bringing Sam Bennett back and various other riders they've signed up. I mean, UAE just seem to have an endless pot of money now that Pogačar's won the Tour, and their backers have realised the kind of the benefits that it can bring to them in whatever way. Then they're just throwing cash everywhere. I mean, we're seeing this kind of development of the super teams, I guess. It's big.
Yeah, and maybe one of the reasons is because he's extended his contract too, hasn't he? Now through till, is it 2027? I think that he's extended through till. So, it's kind of like, obviously they're building a team that will support him for the next 5-6 years, which doesn't bode very well for either Ineos Grenadiers or for Jumbo-Visma, who, until recently we thought those were the two super teams, but now it looks like it's like all sports now. Money is really talking, isn't it? And there's going to be three teams. It would look like there'd be 3 teams vying for contention all the time in the Grand Tours.
But that's what we want, isn't it? We don't want just 2 teams, or as has been in the past with Sky, just 1 team. You want more teams to be all singing or dancing, don't you?
Yeah, I guess you do, but at the same time, you don't want the other kind of, if you've got, say 20 teams in the Grand Tour, you don't want the other 17 teams just kind of scrapping around pointlessly, just being feeder teams for those top 3 teams. So my Tour de France ended with a conversation with Dave Brailsford, where he talked to me about, which I wrote a couple of stories about, which he talked to me about his health problems and the fact that if his health problems continued, he would step down as manager the Ineos Grenadiers team. And we as well as that, we also talked about the kind of leadership issues they've had there, and he was very bullish about the fact that Richard Carapaz getting third was a great result, that they couldn't win, every Grand Tour, that they had a peerless kind of track record, which is all true. But at the same time, you look at the way the Vuelta standings are at the moment, with Egan Bernal, the sole representative, in the top 10, and already kind of ceding enough time to be slightly concerned, I'd have thought, to Primož Roglič. You look at that and you think, are their days of dominance over now? And I'm starting to think maybe they are.
Are they, or are they just moving to a new breed of rider with Tom Pidcock and Sivakov and people like that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I mean, there's news about riders leaving the team. I mean, rumoured about Gianni Moscon leaving, Ivan Sosa's going to Movistar.
Has Geraint Thomas signed a new contract? Because he's out at the end of the year, isn't he?
There's been no announcement of that yet. So I mean, that's another possibility.
Haven't they offered him a reduced contract?
May well have done, yeah.
That's what I heard. Yeah.
So I mean, I think they are kind of renewing and refocusing the team, and obviously they've got Pidcock coming through, and they've probably got their eyes on some other younger riders as well. So it'd be interesting to see where they do go. I mean, obviously they've got a big problem at the moment, in as much as the two Slovenians look pretty much unbeatable in any Grand Tour that they ride, or at least one they ride and they can finish. So I mean,
well, that's the point, isn't it? Because the two best stage race riders are now, well, looking at assuming that Roglič doesn't have a big blank with the Vuelta, the two best stage race riders are now riding for other teams, and 2-3 years ago the best stage race riders all rode for Ineos or Sky, and that's the shift.
Well, yeah. Are you suggesting? Do you think we'll see a big name move to Ineos over the close season? I mean, who's available? Who could Dave Brailsford sign to fill that gap, to take one of the greatest stage races? Because if we're saying that Geraint Thomas is over the hill and Pidcock doesn't want to ride the Tour next year and things like that, I mean, where does he go?
Geraint Thomas is over the hill now. It's been beaten by you.
Yeah, anyone who's been beaten by me is over the hill. I just would like to, just in case Geraint Thomas is listening to this, I would just like to point out.
Hi, Geraint.
Yeah, I would just like to point out he was very nice about it, and he hadn't realised that I was going to go full bore. Completely hadn't realised at all. Yeah. And he had done 4 hours and eaten toast and stuff like that. Yeah. So well, I mean, where do Ineos go?
I think the market's looking pretty sewn up for them in terms of like their options. I mean, they're putting an awful lot of faith in Tom Pidcock, and he's definitely their rising star, and everybody knows, what a prodigious young talent he is, and I guess there's a lot of hope that he will develop in the same way that Wout van Aert, Mathieu van der Poel, Pogačar, that he can be a Grand Tour stage race contender of the future, but he's still a way off that by his own admission. He said he's not riding the Tour de France till 2023 at the start of the Vuelta. He gave a little press conference and said that was the plan. So you've still got you've got Richard Carapaz, and I think he's a spectacularly exciting rider, very aggressive. We saw how good he was in the Tour. We saw how good he was in the Olympic Games road race. But he's Ecuadorian, and Ecuadorians don't necessarily sell sponsorship for a British team. That's the brutal reality of it. And I mean, who's
the next British rider coming through that can compete with Pog and Rog?
Pidcock, but
it's Pidcock then. Then maybe they back him. Maybe they back him. Do you think
he is a
Grand?
That's 2-3 years.
Do you think he's a Grand Tour winning rider?
That's way too premature to comment on that. I think. Don't you think, Pete?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, he's still at the moment. He's essentially a classics rider, and that's what he wants to focus on. So, I think it's going to be a good few years before we see him even thinking about trying to win a Grand Tour.
How old is he?
22.
21.
20, just turned 22. Yeah.
So he's not. I mean, by current Grand Tour winning standards, he's not old. He's not young.
Well, the thing is that you look at the ages of the most happening riders in the peloton at the moment, which is Van der Poel and Pogačar, if you take Roglič out of the equation, and they're all 25 or under, aren't they? Ish.
I think they're 26. Van Aert,
Okay. Well, they're pretty young still, aren't they? They're not anywhere nudging near 30, and Roglič is by far the oldest of them. And it definitely seems to be increasingly a young man's sport. So I think that Pidcock will be accelerated his progress, if anything.
The Belgian Waffle Ride is the biggest gravel race in North America, with 4 venues across the US. The BWR, as it's known, was created as an homage to the great one-day sprint classics of Europe and is defined by long courses that are punctuated by a myriad of off-road sectors. I love an off-road sector. The most unique cycling event in the country, the BWR features a party-like atmosphere on and off the bike, with Belgian feasting before and after. With a long day on the bike between, you can learn more about these crazy events at belgianwaffleride.bike. And I demand at some point in the future to be there for waffles and riding. Pete, you've managed to find out what the answer was to how many non-Ineos or Jumbo teams have won Grand Tours over the past 5 years.
I have indeed. I've managed to locate Google on my computer, and 2017, Tom Dumoulin won the Giro. He was riding for Sunweb, so that was before he moved to Jumbo-Visma. 2019, Richard Carapaz won the Giro. He was riding for Movistar before he moved to Ineos. And as I mentioned before, Simon Yates was the other one who we did mention. So, I mean, apart from that, it's been Ineos, Stroke Sky, Jumbo and UAE who've dominated.
Do you think then, Jeremy, that maybe with these new super teams, do you see the chance of a Sunweb or another team like that winning a Grand Tour over the next 5 years? Do you think it's going to be reduced?
Yeah, I mean, thing for me is, and this is what I thought before the tour started, and I think it's something we all agreed when we arrived in Brest at the start of the tour, like, who can beat Tadej Pogačar, even if he's got a not great team? And he had quite an average team, really. I know he said how great his team was. And they judged things very well because they didn't have that many crashes compared to some other teams. They didn't endure as many injuries as so many other teams. But you look at the individual riders and who's the most talented rider in the sport. A few years ago it was Chris Froome. You know, before that, in terms of stage racing, briefly it was Bradley Wiggins, and then Geraint Thomas had one season when he was, you know, flying as well. So before, you know, at the moment nobody can beat Tadej Pogačar. That's the fact. It doesn't matter about how good your train is. You know, you can have the best train in the world. He's still going to out-climb people and out-time trial them.
Interesting. Somebody needs a good team. Well, we can't link up live with Sophie tonight, but after her seemingly epic journey from Australia to Europe for the summer, she's now back in Australia, making her way home after another long spell in quarantine. So we asked her to leave us a little diary message.
Hola. I'd love to be weighing in on the first week of the Vuelta a España, but sadly I cannot because, believe it or not, my 2021 Tour de France campaign is yet to come to an end. Yes, despite Tadej Pogačar winning the yellow jersey more than a month ago now, I've not been able to yet make it back to my Melbourne hometown because Australia currently has more rules and regulations in place around travel and the COVID-19 pandemic than the country has dangerous animals that can kill you. And there's at least been one of those where I'm currently serving a government-mandated 2-week quarantine sentence in G Block at Darwin's Centre for National Resilience. And resilience there, my friends, is the operative word, because toward the end of my 2-week sentence now, where I've been limited to a single-bed cabin and a small share of a shared veranda, I'm starting to go a bit loopy. It kind of feels like existing maybe, let's say, in purgatory, if not smack bang in the middle of the Bermuda Triangle. Some of my comrades here, I guess you could say, in G Block, have even suggested prison. Except in prison, I guess you're allowed an exercise yard and you don't pay $2,500 for the pleasure of staying. However, I am extremely grateful that I got to go to Europe, that I got government permission to work at the tour, and despite this journey that it has been, I am within 24 hours, I hope, of returning to Melbourne into another lockdown, effectively over 5 cases. But at least there I can have a glass of wine and get my head around the Vuelta, which I'm very much looking forward to. So until then, adios.
Thank you very much to Sophie Smith. We hope to speak to her in real life on the next podcast, which will be in the not-too-distant future. Now, let's talk about Stage 4. The end of Stage 4 was won by Fabio Jakobsen. Now, a year ago, he had injuries that included a brain contusion, a skull fracture, a broken nose, a torn palate, the loss of 10 teeth, and the loss of parts of his upper and lower jaw. To see him winning that stage, arms aloft, Pete, was quite a moment.
It was. I mean, it was I was slightly disappointed on stage 2 when Jasper Philipsen beat Jakobsen in second place, because it just felt like maybe that was a moment, but he got it absolutely right today. He looked phenomenal in the sprint. Arnaud Démare looked like he got it sewn up. He came into the final kilometre with the most teammates. Groupama set him up really well for it, but he kind of went a bit too far out perhaps from the line. Jakobsen got on his wheel and then jumped by him just before the line and won it by a bike length, and it was great. And he spoke, as he always does, Jakobsen. He spoke just so kind of beautifully, I guess, afterwards. Just he thanked the surgeons who'd helped him, all the nursing staff, his team, his family, all the fans that had supported him, and it was just a great moment. I mean, I'm absolutely delighted for him.
I think one of the really impressive things was his ability to put what happened in context as well. That he's not bitter. You could have a lot of reasons to be very bitter about that, especially as his injuries were basically attributed to another rider, Dylan Groenewegen, who served a ban for the incident as well. But he said as Pete says, he spoke really well. And he said, the accident will always be part of my life, but now I can put it behind me. And I actually think that was a pretty generous thing to say in lots of ways, because I think for Dylan Groenewegen, it may release him a bit as well. Do you know what I mean? From the burden of like always being the guy that caused this terrible crash. And the fact that you can look at, I know relations between them, as I understand it, remain strained, but maybe Jakobsen has kind of released him a bit as well from, the burden that he was carrying around.
It was another one of those great cycling stories, wasn't it? The fact that somebody who had gone through everything he'd gone through, when friends of his didn't know if he was going to make it again, didn't know if he was going to make it, let alone whether he was going to be able to ride a bike and win a stage. It's a great story that he's managed to win this stage, and I think it is going to be one of those highlights of the Vuelta. And talking of highlights of the Vuelta, I mean, it's no real point right now. First few days have been done when we were recording this podcast, time agnostically, as we like to do, to talk about who is going to win it. Slightly strange GC standings that they are, but we have, Pete, some quite monstrous stages coming up. We said at the start there was 9 summit finishes, and some of those are over the next few days. Yeah,
we've kind of, quite oddly for the Vuelta, the organisers have been very generous to the sprinters this year. So we're getting quite a number of, we're kind of getting a hard stage and a sprint stage almost one day one day the next. And but in the next few days, it's going to change a bit. I mean, we've got on Friday, there's an uphill finish. It's only a third cap finish that might suit the likes of Michael Matthews, perhaps. Maybe some of the other more punchy riders. Might suit somebody like Primož Roglič, obviously. And then, that's on Thursday. On Friday, we've got a really tough stage to the Balcón de Alicante. And it's interesting because it goes through the area where a lot of pros train during the winter around Calpe, so they'll know all the climbs really well, the Tudons, the Colau, the Puerta de Tibi. They know all these climbs really well, and the final climb is absolutely brutal. So I mean, that's definitely going to be a bit of a GC sort out that day.
Yeah, it's interesting, that stage, isn't it? Because it's like within rolling in distance of all those big hotels on the beach that they stay in, and they hole up in the winter in January and do these long rides in the kind of like in the wintry sunshine. So as you say, I guess a lot of them will be really familiar with it. But that final climb, which it's not that long, is it? It's at 4K, isn't it? I think.
Yes.
And it's
yeah.
about 9 to 10% on average. So that sounds fairly brutal. But as you say, the following day, this coming Saturday, is a flat stage. Looks totally made for sprint, apart from possibility of crosswinds, I guess. But then there's another summit finish again on Sunday, isn't there, Pete?
Yeah, there's the Vellifique on Sunday, which is an absolutely beautiful pass. I mean, it's I've not been up there, unfortunately, but I've seen lots of pictures of it for a feature I've written prior to the Vuelta, and it's got these beautiful, I think there are 20 hairpins near the top of the climb. It's absolutely astounding, the setting, and it's set kind of above the Tabernas Desert, where a lot of the spaghetti westerns were filmed. And I mean, kind of, we've had a spaghetti western theme already this week with the third stage started near the cemetery where the good, the bad, and the ugly concluded. So I mean, there's kind of a spaghetti western theme to the first week of this Vuelta.
So if it's the good, the bad, and the ugly, and there's three of us on this podcast, who's who?
Well,
Pete's definitely good.
Yes.
So I'll fight you, Jeremy, for bad and ugly. Which one?
yeah.
Which one do you want?
I think that really it's pretty obvious, isn't it?
Okay. Why is it? Am I ugly? Is that what you're saying?
I'm bad. Which leaves ugly.
He is saying it. Fine. Thank you very much. Let's do it. Let's say who's going to win this Vuelta, the 2021 Vuelta España. Pete, you can go first. Who's going to win it?
Can we do podiums?
No. Why do you always want to do a podium? Podiums are
It's the only way
boring.
to do it, isn't it?
No one cares about who came
but
third.
It's each way betting. That's what it is.
But we're not doing it. It's literally, I want you to put all your eggs in a single basket. Okay, you can tell me your podium, but I'm only taking the first person who won.
All right. Well, I'm just going to go for the obvious and say Primož Roglič.
Okay. Boring.
I know. Yeah.
Jeremy, go on, give us your podium.
Well, yeah, I'd absolutely say that as well, that barring some major mishap, which, having said that, though, given that he has this track record now of blowing big stage races, doesn't he? Because he blew the Tour de France last year, and then he blew Paris-Nice this year as well, didn't he? Do you remember?
And the Dauphiné last year.
And the Dauphiné, of course, yeah. So he's got.
He might be listening to this. Don't get in his head.
No, but he seems to get in winning positions a lot, and then something happens, So you're never quite sure with him. I don't think you can ever quite put the house on him. But looking at the top 10 now, he's got time on everybody that is likely to provide any major threat to him. So you'd think he's
See, the reason I'm no good at betting is, the smart money would go on Primož Roglič. Of course it would, where he sat. And then maybe the second thing you'd say, you go, Egan Bernal, he looks great. He's within striking distance as we record this. But I've always liked to go for an outside bet. I like an outside bet. So I'm going to do this for Pete. Mikel Landa. I think Mikel Landa is going to come. He's like a phoenix from the flames. He's going to rise up the standings. And this is his year in that wonderful Bahrain victorious kit. This is his year, Pete.
It could well, but his team looked phenomenal actually the other day. As long as they can all stay up with Mark Podium, they look phenomenal anyway. He looked phenomenal.
Well, not a smidge of hope for Rain Sarah May then. Not even a glimpse.
Well, you tell me. What a fabulous winner! It's great to see smaller teams wearing jerseys. Intermarché, Wanty, Gruber. Is he? He's not going to hold that all the way through till the end of the Vuelta, is he?
No, he's not. No, he's not.
Well then, no. I say no then. Jeremy, I say no. And there you go. The end of this first Vuelta podcast, this first, of course, on Tête podcast is done. Thank you very much to our Prince of the Pyrenees. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you, OJ.
Thank you. Oh, actually, no. Thank you very much. I'm going to redo that. And say thank you very much to the good. Thank you, Pete. Thank you very much to the bad. Thank you, Jeremy. And then, of course, thank you to me, the ugly. Thank you to you for listening as well. Check out LaCourseOnTête.com for more writing, and also be across all of Peloton's social channels for more of their content. And thank you to our tasty Belgian waffle ride friends as well for sponsoring this podcast. And until the next one, we'll see you there. Cue that music.